Guys, today's video is going to be a little different. So this is not only just an intro, I'm doing this because I'm letting you guys know this video is going to John Grimsmo at Grimsmo Knives. And this is basically a disclaimer to strike down anybody that would try and do a copyright claim or something for me. John has complete permission to use any part of this video as free use. I'm not going to say, I know you guys all know that I've copyrighted and watermarked all my content, but John is free to use this for whatever video. Now, if you remember a while back, John Grimsmo posted up a thing where he said, show me how you would sharpen this knife, and it was about the Norseman. So what we have is we have the Norseman that I got in from my customer Will, and he wanted some anodizing and stuff. Don't pay, I just cleaned it. It's got some water and stuff on it. He wanted some anodizing. He wanted try that again in English, some specific things for this done with ano, but we're also gonna sharpen it. I told John that I would film it because when I filmed the last one and I sent it in with the form, he said all he got from me and another guy was just basically a screenshot. So what we're gonna do today is I'm gonna do the video, I'm gonna send John a link, and basically it'll be like simulcast, and whatever parts of it he wants to use is fine. So with that being said, I'm gonna wait for the light to change so I can film properly out there, clean up a little bit, and then I'm gonna get into this. But as always, if you're wearing headphones, turn them down because here comes the music. So since this is a little bit different of a video, you guys have seen me do sharpening videos, and I've done Norseman sharpening videos, but this, not everybody that's gonna see this is my typical audience. So we'll talk about the Grimsmo Norseman first. So most of you guys know Grimsmo Knives, John and Eric made the Norseman. It's been one of my grail knives for a long time. I had one basically that I was gonna order, but I had to stop. In the process of starting this business, I spent the money that was my Grail knife fund on this business. So basically what you have is you have a very distinct recurved Tonto blade, and then this forward leading edge of the Tonto is a very well done convex that goes basically all the way from here up and is a full convex. And it's amazing, it's beautiful, it gets stupid, crazy sharp. But your issues are, it's a recurve and a Tonto. So not only are you dealing with two distinct edges, you're also dealing with two distinct edge profiles, recurved and then a convex. Now I do all convex edges. Most of you guys that follow me on YouTube do know this, but you have a very distinct change in these angles. Now, this one's gonna pose a more of a unique issue because if you can see, let me turn this around and I'll show you. Someone has used a fixtured system and done multiple faceted edges on that forward leading edge of that Tonto that I'm going to have to remove and then do the convex on. So this one's gonna pose some problems. You can see there's three distinct faceted edges on that. So, as soon as the light gets better, we're gonna go out to my workbench and I'm going to basically video the entire process of sharpening. I may edit some of it down to shorter because it's gonna take a while, but you guys, this is my disclaimer. I am a professional knife sharpener. For those of you that do not know, don't follow his channel, might be watching it on John's. I do things in a fashion that I do not recommend for anyone. It's just that I grew up learning how to do it on small stones. There's a method to it. There's a way I've changed the way I do it to get my convex, and especially the way I do Tontos. I do not recommend that unless you have done a lot of knives that way that you even try, because I'm gonna be holding a sharpened edge to get some of these forward areas. It's gonna look dangerous. Trust me, I've sharpened at this point more knives than most people will ever see in their entire life. So please, if you're gonna try to duplicate what I'm doing, one, don't do it on an expensive knife, and two, wear a glove, a pair of gloves, something to give you a little bit of leeway. So there's all the disclaimer and stuff out of the way. I apologize for the lengthy intro, but like I said, this is not just going on my channel. This is going to be sent to John, and he can pick and choose how he wants to do this. So there may be a lot of people that have never seen how I'm doing this. So bear with me. As soon as the light changes where I can get good views and everything, I will go out and we will begin the sharpening on this. I will record the entire process. So guys, the next thing that I was going to talk about was the type of stones that I use for sharpening pretty much everything. There's different types. The thing is, with a Tonto, you're going to have two distinct angles, two distinct edges. So your sharpening is going to be done a little bit differently, because there is on every Tonto, unless it's a Japanese, unless it's a Japanese style Tonto, you're going to have that point. And what you have to keep in mind is you want that point to be even on both sides, or it's going to affect the actual geometry of the knife. So with that being said, you have to work evenly on both edges in order to maintain that angle, that point, that marriage point in the same place. But since this is a recurve Tonto, you've got to be a little bit, your tools have to be a little bit different. And the reason being is because that stone, you see that gap right there? You might not be able to see it. I can definitely see it. You can see there's light underneath. The radius of that is not going to allow me to use a typical size stone. So I use a 1/2 inch stone. Like I said, I do everything by hand. So we're going to get into that, but I just wanted to touch base on the stones. These are the stones I use. You're going to need a narrow stone. There's some systems that sell a ceramic rod and things like that. I don't use a fixtured system. I strictly use stones freehand. So we're gonna get into that. I'm gonna get it all set up. We'll take the pictures, but like I said, take the video, I mean. But so, like I said, there's some definite things you have to consider when doing a knife like this. They're a little bit challenging for your average novice knife sharpener. So let me get the stones all out, laid out, and we'll get started. All right, so I've actually changed the angle of my camera. I'm gonna kind of show you how I approach this. So what I do is I usually will start with the forward leading edge, because it allows me to get that fairly acute and rectify any of the issues, because I'm gonna hold on to here. I would rather this not be as sharp, because I'm gonna hold on to this knife like this. And that's where I say I don't recommend this. So I just basically start and I find my angle, and I start working my way back, and I look at where I'm knocking the shoulders off. I live real close to the Naval Air Station and the airport. You may hear some aircraft. So what I'm doing right now is I'm basically reprofiling this edge. I'm trying to completely change and remove those shoulders that were on there. But like I said, you want to work evenly from side to side. And this is where I get that grip in my hand, and then people see me do this and they're like, oh, that looks dangerous. I'm actually not touching. My fingers are pinching here. It's just a way for me to choke up on it a little bit and have some fine control of that knife in hand. So like I said, somebody has faceted this badly. And this is gonna be a longer video, guys. I'm not gonna lie. This is gonna be a fairly long video, because I am going to have to reprofile this and remove the old facets and get it back to the original convex edge that it was intended to be when it left from John and Eric's hands. So, I've already started. I can see where I'm knocking the shoulders off and everything. What I'll do is I'm going to continue on this. This is my coarsest stone I'm going to use for right now. This is a 250 grit stone. And I'm basically just removing enough material to realign these angles and get them back to a full convex like they were supposed to be. Because not only is it give it better cutting potential, but it's more attractive if you have one consistent, even bevel from the origin all the way to the apex on a knife that was intended to have a full convex. So give me a few minutes here working on this. I will put you guys in time-lapse mode so you can see what I'm doing. I'll turn the camera around so you can see it at a closer view here in a minute, and then I'll start some time-lapse after that. I really hope you guys can see what I'm doing. So just in that short period of time, I don't know if you can see it, I've removed most of those additional facets and I've cleaned up those shoulders to get one consistent, even scratch pattern. There is still some at the tip here and here. That's where it seemed to be the worst. So what I do, keep my stones wet. I use water stones. I keep my stones nice and wet, and I do a rocking motion where I'm changing the direction and angle of that knife in hand the entire time. You might not be able to see it, but what I do is I change the position in the stone, and all I'm doing is making a bunch of little angles that turn into one big radius by the time I'm done. So like I said, I'm trying to make sure that I'm paying close attention to that angle point where these two edges, where this edge and this forward leading edge are going to meet. I'm being real careful to make sure that I'm marrying these up and removing the same amount of material from one side to the other. Because if you don't, not only will it look unattractive, but like I said, it affects the actual geometry of the knife when in cutting. I apologize for any noise, guys. I do this outside, and I live in San Diego, so there are a lot of people around. So that side, almost married. This side, I got to work down here, and that. And so what you're going to want to do is, if you can't really see it real clearly, you can always just put some black magic marker on the blade and see where you are and are not removing material. This side towards the tip is way worse than the other side. And you can see it, if you look down on it, you can see that these angles are not consistent from side to side. But like I said, with it having that point at the very front, that secondary point here, that makes it a little more difficult. So what I'm gonna do is, I will stop this, pause this where it's at, and I will just do this in time lapse just to get us through the initial resetting the edge angle profile, and then we'll get into the finer points of it. So you guys can see my technique. Like I said, I don't recommend it for someone who's not as experienced in sharpening. So I'm getting some even consistency between the 2 points. So now is the point where I've got it almost completely. Let me show you how well you're gonna be able to see it. I've removed the majority. Let me get behind the camera. I've removed the majority of the facets. As you can see, I've reconvexed that. There's a spot there. And on this side, there's a really bad spot at the point right there. And some back here. So I'm gonna continue to realign these edges, but I'm gonna put you guys in time-lapse mode so it's a little faster. So guys, I actually had to resort to a much coarser stone because this has got a very bad spot on the tip of this because someone sharpened this absolutely improperly. This is not how this knife was meant to be sharpened. This is the kind of knife that was meant to be sharpened by hand, not with a fixtured system. You cannot get this edge, this forward leading edge, done properly on a fixture. There's just really no way. And so I'm having to take off significantly more material than I had hoped. So I switched from a 250 grit stone to an 80 grit stone because I'm having to do some serious realignment of this edge geometry, and it's just going to take forever if I continue to try and do it on too fine of a stone. So I am still doing my little technique. I just want to let you know what you saw there. So we will get this turned back down so that you can see what I'm doing. But I want to let you know, I dug out a much coarser stone. It was more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Like I said, guys, this is a technique that I use on all Tonto knives. It's just sometimes the recurve ones are done different, especially these Grimsmos. John and Eric do an amazing job on this forward edge, having it be a very good convex. That does not lend itself very easily to be sharpened on a fixtured system such as a Wicked Edge, Edge Pro, any of the Lansky, any of those systems that require that you lock it in and you set one angle. Well, that's the problem. It is a radius. So when I say a convex is a radius, it's rounded on both sides all the way down. And so this one was very heavily flattened in a couple places to try and account for that, and it just does not. It takes from the aesthetic. It's not the way the knife was designed, and it's just not the proper way to sharpen a knife like this. They have their good points and places, but a knife like this is not one of them. So basically, this side is already ready to go. The lock scale side is already ready to go, but the problem I have is that the show scale is still badly flattened in one spot, almost to the point where it's recurved. So, but the reason I have to keep going back to the lock scale side is, well, you want your edge geometry to be even on both sides, and on top of that, like I said, the secondary point, you want to make sure that they're consistent from one side to the other, or like I said, you will have issues with your blade and edge geometry. If you see my stone slipping on my hand a little bit, I'm going to take care of that in a second. Problem is that I had sharpened some knives in high carbon steel, and there's some baking soda in my water, and it's making it slippery. So we're going to rinse this off in this tub here, the secondary tub, that's what it's for. And I'll just set it in there and just rinse that off and get a little bit more moisture on that. That's not going to make it slippery and slide off my hands and make me cut myself. So we will go back to, like I said, I was just trying to explain kind of what was going on with the change in stone and things like that. We will go back to the time lapse and get this sped up a little bit so you guys aren't going to have to sit and watch this. And I will do some voiceover and let you guys know, any issues that I ran into at any point during this. But once this is done, this is the longest part of it. The reprofiling and edge alignment and adjustment is always the longest part of sharpening any knife, and especially one that has had something done to it that is not correct. So let me get you guys on time lapse, and I will be back in a moment. All right, guys. So we're back to it, and as you can see, I've reached a point where I've removed all of the facets, and I have convexed that back out to where it's supposed to be, all the way up. There's some small little issues here, but those are going to come out through the grit progression. And I still have to marry these points. If you look, that angle's still there, but I'm going to have to remove material here to get that. So what I have to do now is I've got to start working on this, because I have to bring the material off to marry that, and then I have to go point the forward edge and then the recurve area to make sure that I'm marrying these points up where they belong, and I'm following and getting my grit progression correctly. So we'll start on a coarse stone in here. After I touch this up a little bit, this is really, really coarse. It's an 80 grit stone, and like I said, you can see there's some minor areas that still need touched up. But the next step is we go ahead and we start our grit progression and line this all up and make it all really, really sharp, really, really pretty. You can have an attractively polished edge that still does have some bite, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Hi guys, I am back on that less coarse stone that is around the 250 grit. Now this is a diamond stone. I don't have the small 1/2 inch diamond stones. All I'm doing right now is, because these cut so well, they're gonna allow me to expedite some of this forward edge, but now I'm just refining my scratch pattern. I've set my bevels. These are gonna allow me to set my bevels more easily. I can see the differences in the scratch pattern and what I've removed and what I haven't. So I'm just gonna give this its initial finish on this 250, and then I'm gonna move and do the same thing on the recurve area. Now recurves require, like I said, a different kind of stone, just because of the fact that you have to have something that can touch the entire radius. Some people use ceramic rods, some people use a radius stone on a fixtured system, which you can do. You can do the recurve area on a fixtured system. It's that forward edge that is convex that you can't, because it's not one set angle. It's multiple angles all put together to make one radius. So I'm just doing a quick touch up on this, and then I will come back to it. I just want to try and make sure that I've completely evened out that forward secondary point. It had been kind of screwed up. If you guys want to know why I'm looking at my phone, it's because it's actually the controller for my camera on my phone that I'm using to film, and I can actually start and stop it and see if I'm in frame and things like that. One of the best things I ever got was for my YouTube channel was that Apple Watch. Okay, so I'm done with that. Now, like I said, the inner part of this has got to be done a little differently, because you got to have something that'll get down in the radius. Like I said, some people use different things. I use these 1/2-inch aluminum oxide stones. This is a fairly coarse one. This is a 220 grit, which is about the same grit range that I was in with the stone I was just using on that forward edge. And I'm doing the same thing, the same movement, that same convex edge, but I'm doing it on the inside of this recurve, and I'm making sure that I don't drag that point and round this over. I want this to be a defined point and secondary angle where those 2 points marry. For 2 reasons. 1, it was designed that way. 2, it's aesthetically pleasing and attractive. And I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Let me come behind the camera and I'll show you what I mean. So now I've brought it back. Oops, sorry guys. I've brought it back and I'm re-establishing that point. And I'm gonna do that on both sides. You can see how that one's a little softer because it did not get sharpened correctly. That point's a little softer. I'm gonna make both of these points look exactly the same. Hopefully, in theory, I've done it a bunch of times, and we will get that. Now I can feel that I've already formed a burr, and I can look and see if I'm missing any of that edge in my grit progression. I'll be able to tell really easily just by looking at it. Ooh, it's windy. So let's go ahead and we'll get, this won't take as long. I'm gonna go ahead and just leave you with me for this. So, I'm not gonna put you on the time lapse because I don't think this is going to take as long. It normally does not on these. Some knives it does, this one, the Norseman's do not. These things sharpen up. They sharpen up really well, really easily. RWL 34 is an incredibly good steel. If you're a sharpener, you're gonna love it. Especially if you're doing it artisanal by hand like I do, it's great. It loves to take a nice keen edge. It's not so hard to sharpen that it makes it miserable and unpleasant, but it does hold an edge really well. And it's not too incredibly difficult to sharpen. So I do have to bring this point up just ever so slightly and marry it with the other side. And then the actual edge angles that were on this were a little off. So we're gonna take care of that while we're on this stone. Now, like I said, I have cut myself doing knives this way. So if this is not something I recommend per se, but this is just how I do it. And this is the way I sharpen pretty much every knife that comes in to the business. There we go. There we go. Now we've brought both those angles up. They should look the same from side to side. So there's that one. And there's that one. Now, like I said, this had been ground down. I'm gonna try and even those bevels out and get that angle back the way it was, and I'm going to work more on the heel here. But with this having been, that point is kind of rounded over because somebody used a fixtured system, and you can still see some of the remnants in there of the previous facets. But over the course of the grit progression, we should be able to get all of those out and clean them up, and then anything that's left, any shoulders that's left, will get knocked off in the stropping process. So let's look at our edge down at the heel. This does not have a real pronounced, it doesn't have a sharpening notch at all, which, John, I'm glad to see you did do some sharpening notches on the rasp. It definitely makes our lives easier when we sharpen, but I want to try and get that all evened out, make it look a little bit more attractive. I try not to take off too much material just for aesthetics, but I do want the knife to look consistent and clean all the way while I'm sharpening. So any work that I can do that would allow that, I try to, but the flip side of that is additional work costs extra. I base it on time taken for sharpening. So let's go ahead and put you guys in time lapse while I work on this some more, because I do have some work to do back here at the heel, because material got removed here but not here. And I still want to marry those. I want to marry these that forward point a little bit better. So let me go ahead and put you on time lapse, and you've already seen basically the technique, and I'll bring you back when I start getting up through the grit progression. So guys, basically I've set my angles, and I'll start up my grit progression, and as I go up my grit progression, I'm going to refine this edge. So I like to tell people, if you're sharpening, you're only sharpening till about 600 grit, let's say. Because anything after that, all you're doing is refining your edge, because you're not taking off enough material to change your edge angle. So we just finished on that stone. We're going to move to a much finer stone. This is a 400 grit stone, and I'm going to continue to work in here because there's not that much material to remove on this. I'm not having to do as near as much edge alignment on this inner recurve area as I am going to have to do on the front. So I'm going to go ahead and work on this and then progress to the next stone up on the leading edge of the tonto. So all I'm doing at this point is I'm just taking off a little bit of material still, but refining that edge. Now, if you guys noticed, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling for a burr. I don't recommend not doing that. You can feel for a burr. I have gotten to a point where I can kind of hear the difference when it starts to form the burr, and it feels different, how it interfaces with the stone, because I have sharpened literally thousands of knives over the course of the last maybe 5 years. So this stone is not going to take off near as much material, and it's going to allow you to refine your edge aesthetically and functionally. So as you can see, I'm touching, that's why I don't recommend this. I am touching my hand in places, and I'm trying to make sure that you guys are still in frame. Let me lower this down a little bit. You might not be able to actually see what I'm doing. I apologize. So people have asked me why I do a push and a pull. There's two reasons. What it does is it allows you to, first of all, maximize your time and effort. But the other reason is that forward leading stroke, there's a chance that there might be pieces of grit that your edge is actually banging into, and it might cause little nicks. If you're on your way back, what you're doing is you're basically stropping that back. Your micro striations are going the same direction, but you're not going to have near as many issues with your apex being dinged up if you're doing both, because one is cutting coarsely and then going back the other direction. You're basically refining what you just did. Always keep your stones good and wet if you're using water stones. So these aluminum oxide water stones cut RWL 34 really, really well. They do a great job. they leave a really, really nice refined scratch pattern. And right now I'm just looking to make sure that I'm bringing that all the way up and removing all of the previous scratch pattern all the way to that point and the apex. Sometimes you'll be going up in grit and you'll notice that you see scratch pattern from the previous stone because the scratch pattern on the coarse stone was deep enough that as you were going, it looks like you've hit it all, but you've only scratched it a little bit and there might be some low inconsistencies, low areas as you go up to the next stone. Sometimes you won't see that until you get to, like I'm on a 400 grit stone. I might not notice a low spot until I get to 600 grit, and then I have to go back down and basically redo some things. Nice thing about hand sharpening is you notice I can focus on specific areas and then marry them back in with a full stroke. So let's go ahead and we will go up to the same grit stone on that forward leading edge. So this is also a 400 grit stone, but I can use a wider stone on these because I'm not having to get into that radius. This is a lot like the way I'm doing this would be basically the same way I sharpen a chisel. Sharpening a chisel and sharpening a tonto are very, very similar. These are really, really convex well. And it requires multiple angles to hit what you're trying to get done. And you have to be real conscious, especially on this forward convex, of what you're doing and not taking off too much material from one side to the other. So what you're doing as you go up in grit progression is, like I said, you're just refining the work you've done. You're basically your first stone is your heavy mover. It's your prime mover. It's taken off a majority of the material you need removed. And then these stones are just building on that and refining what you've already done. So, see? And that's what I was talking about. So, on that coarser stone, it looked as though I had gotten all of that previous low spot out on this side. However, when I got to a higher grit, you can see that there's an area in there that is still, even though the other stone was hitting it, there's still a low spot in there. Still a couple artifacts of that being incorrectly sharpened. So I'm gonna have to go back down a stone and work on that tip again. So I'll put you guys, this is gonna be one of those where you go back and forth and back and forth. All right, guys. So I left you on time lapse until I got to a point where I was comfortable bringing you guys back. So I'm back at the 400 grit stage. I have taken care of all those issues. I am just currently taking off a little bit of material. Sorry, my wife just came home and is throwing things out. Taking off a little bit more material just to marry these two angles together and make sure that the edge geometry is okay, because whoever sharpened this canted one side over, so the angles weren't exactly the same. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to re-establish the proper edge geometry so that both sides are at the same angle. Roughly, I do everything freehand, so I don't, it's not exact, it's not precise. So I'm gonna pause you guys here for a second because I have to take care of something, and I will be right back and we'll move to the next set of stones. All right, guys, so like I said, we are ready to go up in grit progression. I'm back. We are going to go up to 600. I can only take this to 1,000 because that's the only stones that I have. Only go to 1,000 for this. So I'm going to the 600 grit. This time I'm going to start, because it just put the larger 600 grit in, it's got to soak for a minute. So I'm going to start on the interior recurve on this. And this is the last stone that I consider truly being a sharpening stone. Don't flip out the fact that I sometimes don't look. Sometimes I need to take my eyes off to focus on what I really do when I'm sharpening. I spend a lot of time doing my sharpening by feel and sound. I have done this way forever. there's a lot of times I'll look away and focus on talking to you so that I can take my mind off of this and actually do it properly. There's a lot of times that if I'm looking at it and I pay too much attention, I get myself into a point where I screw it up. So I do have to do something real quick. This stone has got a rough spot right on the corner. That can screw up your, I can actually screw your edge up pretty badly if you have a chip in a stone, and I'm feeling, yeah, there's some chips on that. I'll just do both corners. There's when you flatten your stones, you should always be feeling for chips. So, there we go, that's much better. And that happens when you slam the corner of a ricasso or get it up against the edge the wrong way, get it up against the knife the wrong way. So this stone, you don't have to pay near as much attention to how much material you're going to remove at any given time, because the fact is it doesn't remove very much. There's a lot of, most knives, a 600 grit edge on most knives is well above what you're going to get from factory. This is not factory sharpening. It's not a I call it crazy sharp because it's a different kind of sharp. So good for you, Siri. Watch this talking to me. So I love sharpening these because they are challenging. It's one of the things I've never liked to stagnate. I like to try and improve my skills in knife making, knife sharpening, and so these knives provide you with that opportunity because they will present you with a challenge. So let me just polish some of this with a little bit of scratch pattern left in a couple places, and then I'm going to get the bigger stone out and move to that forward leading part of the Tonto. So let's use a good cleaner rag. So this is the point where you've got to start paying attention to grit contamination, because if you want a good finished edge, you want to make sure that you're cleaning between stones, especially when you're going up into the more refined parts of the sharpening, where you're going up your grit progression. The higher you go up in grit, the harder it's going to be to get a small scratch from errant grit from the previous stone. It's going to be a lot harder to get that out when you get above this point. So let's go ahead and get that 600 grit stone out. And this is where we start knocking those shoulders off like I was talking about and making it more of a consistent convex. So I'm doing the forward part of this. So while I'm doing this, let me explain what I'm doing. When I start sharpening, I pick an angle and I do like 3 minor adjustments while I'm doing it on each side. And those 3 adjustments are always gonna be a little bit different. And so what you get is all these little shoulders. And as you're going, you're knocking those off, and what you wind up with at the end, by the time you get to a really fine stone, you've knocked all those shoulders off pretty much, and it allows you to have that full radius convex. And just by the nature of hand sharpening, a lot of times you wind up with a convex edge. So at this point, I mean, I could stop at this stone and we would be, it's a really refined edge. It's razor sharp. I can already feel that it is incredibly sharp even before I've stropped it down and taken off any additional coarseness. So I apologize if I'm not talking. I'm focusing on making sure that I've got my shoulders knocked off and things like that. So we're gonna take a look at it and I'll show you real quick. We'll turn the camera around real quick and I'll show you. So you can see we have reached a point where I don't have multiple facets. What you'll see is just tiny, tiny little facets along that edge in a couple spots that I'm gonna continue to shoulder off. There's one right there. I think that one's gonna wind up staying. I'm gonna talk to the customer and see if he wants me to knock that off. I mean, I can, but that's removing more material than I really feel comfortable. I've maintained my forward point, that transition, that marriage point on both sides. They're consistent from side to side. That's important. And then we're gonna go up one more stone. I'm gonna maybe just hit that with that 600 and see if I can't roll that into the convex, but it's not looking promising. If it was gonna happen, it probably would have happened on the lower stones. But like I said, there reaches a point where you want to stop taking material off just for the sake of aesthetics, because then you're detracting from the life of the knife. So, now detracting from the life of the knife, sorry, helicopter. That's something I like to think about when I'm doing knives. These knives are, sorry, what I was saying before the flight students from the Naval Air Station across the harbor flew over was you're actually, every time you sharpen, you're taking material off. You're detracting from the life of the knife. So I try to strike a balance between the aesthetics of the sharpening and the functionality of the sharpening and the length of service of this blade. This is a very expensive knife. It's not something that you're just going to be able to replace on a whim, especially not the fact that, John, you don't make a lot of these. So there's not a lot of them out there. So right now I'm trying to get that last little facet that's all the way back on the spine, maybe knock that in, and you won't be able to see it as badly. But it's pretty deep. It's pretty deep, so I think I'm just going to leave well enough alone. So if you notice, there's times where I'm using short strokes in a specific area and focusing on a certain area, and then I'm using the long sweeping stroke that covers the entire blade. That allows me to focus on some spots and then blend that in and take off any shoulders that I may have formed or facets that I formed, because I'm working on a certain area that may have been cut deeply with a stone or something like that. So but at this point, I've left actual sharpening and getting into honing, because I am on my final stone, the 1000 grit, and we'll do that inner. And then once we get past this final honing stone, this 1000 grit stone, we'll get into some stropping. And I'll talk about how stropping works and things like that as we do it. But this should not take me very long to get to a point where we are ready to just go ahead and finish this up. And I apologize, I know it's been a long video. I tried to use some time lapse to make it easier for you guys, but the fact is that it is what it is. It takes a long time. It was much longer for me than it was for you. Like I said, all I'm doing now is I'm just removing the scratch pattern. It might look like I'm removing a lot of material. I really am not removing much material. The only thing I'm doing is getting rid of the last remnants of the scratches from the last stone. And sometimes it takes longer on certain knives than others. The RWL 34, like I said, is very forgiving. It's great. It takes such a keen edge so quickly that it really is a dream to sharpen. It's in the Damasteel mix as well. Damasteel is another one that just gets terrifyingly sharp so quickly, and just beautifully polished edge that still has a lot of bite, because like I said, this is still a 1000 grit edge. I take other knives. I have stones that I can take things to 10,000 grit, and strops that can take them down to 20 or 30,000. You know, but the flip side is you have to temper that with what is the customer going to cut with. Cut it with, I mean, cut with it. There we go. That's the English that I was looking for. So basically, I'm gonna wipe this off, take a look at it, and then we'll do that last step on the forward leading edge. Oh yeah, that scratch pattern that's perfect. Perfect, nice appleseed convex. No real burr to speak of. Final stone. Is actually, it's an 1100 grit stone, because I can't use my 1000 grit aluminum oxide. This is a 1100 grit diamond stone. It gets you the same place you're going. I just broke my 1000 grit aluminum oxide stone. So I have different stones for different steels. The nice thing about RWL34 is you can use it's sharpener friendly. Like I said, it will go well on any set of stones that you happen to decide to use. I wish more makers made knives out of RWL34. I've said it before. Some people think it's a budget steel. They're like, oh, it's a garbage budget steel, this and that. I find it amazing. I love it, and it's just something that it's a joy to sharpen. The rasks, the Grimsmo rasks, I loved sharpening those. Those, same as this, super, super keen edge, super well done. But like I said, I also sharpen hand tools and things like that. So this method of sharpening is not something that I'm unaccustomed to. We're reaching the end of it, guys. We're reaching the end of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at it and see if there's any areas that I need to touch up still. There's one small area there that does need a touch. So I would say to anyone that's curious about the sharpening stones, if you want to, if you've got any questions about the stones I use, the stones I'm using, feel free to contact me. I have a link to my email down below or in the comments section of the video. So, of this video, the native video, the one I'm shooting, not necessarily the one that John is putting up, because I don't know how much of my raw footage he's actually going to use. But like I said, he's welcome to use any of it. This was something that I just had a knife come in, and I said, hey, you know what, let me go ahead and reach out to John, since the previous attempt at getting a sharpening, like how would you sharpen this knife video up, just did not pan out the way he was hoping. All right, final little spot there. And then we're gonna strop it, marry it in. Let's see how pretty it looks. So give me a second to get my strop out, and we'll talk about stropping. I use, for knives like this, I use a leather strop loaded with chromium oxide. I have diamond strops loaded with diamond paste. I will lift you up here so we can talk about it. I have a strop that I use that was made for me by a subscriber that has a nice rounded area for recurves, nice flat area for the flats. And you should always, like right before you strop, anytime before you strop, you should load your strop with fresh chromium oxide or whatever you're stropping using, unless it's diamond, because it breaks down. It's softer than the steel, it does break down. And what happens is you wind up with a burnished edge as opposed to a sharp, bitey edge. So stropping is simply the final step to make sure you remove the entire burr. And for me, I use it to polish off any additional shoulders that I may have missed in the process of the sharpening, just to give it a little bit cleaner, more aesthetic, attractive look. And I just cut myself. It is sharp. As callous as my hands are, the fact that I cut myself should say a lot. We will not hold it that way on this side. We'll go back over onto this side where there's some more clean chromium and do that. And then I'm gonna hit this forward on a diamond strop just to make sure that I'm getting a good, consistent, even strop. So now let me get down in that recurve some more. And the first thing we're gonna do before anything is we're gonna do a sharpness test. So let me get a piece of fine magazine paper. This will work. Let's go ahead and there you go, guys. There you go. There's your forward. There's your forward edge. There's the recurve. I'll turn it around for you in a second. We're gonna go ahead and strop that forward edge because there's a couple spots where I really need some more polishing potential. Because there were some deeper scratches in there. They're trying to just cloud everything a little bit. So this is my 1 micron. I make the strap myself. It's a 1 micron balsa. This one I made. The other ones I've been purchasing, I wasn't happy with the last ones I purchased. So this is loaded with a 1 micron diamond emulsion. Just for aesthetics. So, give me a second, guys. We'll get it turned around. I'll show you the finished product on the better reverse camera, so that you can take a good hard look at how the edge looks after it's been fixed. So, give me just a second. All right, guys. So here is your finished, gorgeous 1000 grit edge. There is your marriage point on that Tonto. As you can see, like I said, there's a couple little areas that are still showing the original scratch pattern, but they're not affecting the actual sharpness. If you look, you can see that that angle is consistent from side to side. Let me see if I can get it in the light so you can see. That's one of the things I check, is to make sure that when I'm looking down on it, that angle is consistent at that marriage point from side to side, which it is. And it is nightmarishly sharp, guys, not a joke. Let's go ahead and we'll get a piece of paper up here and I'll show you how sharp it is on both the front leading edge and the rear part of the recurved area. So I use magazine paper. Magazine paper gives you a good analog for how sharp things are. It can be a challenge to cut. So just touching it there, and then let's move this to the very tip. Just touching, just barely touching, and it is cutting like a dream. Let me see, can I get this? It's hard to cut paper on camera. I'm not gonna lie to you. Let's get that loose area out of the way. Let's go ahead and do it on this side. There you go. So, I mean, it is effortlessly cutting. I could lather up and shave with this knife. I love these knives. They are so attractive. So John's followers, my followers, I know you guys always, my guys always love when I do one of these. That's how I sharpen a Grimsmo Norseman. Long video, I apologize, but there's a lot of steps to it, especially when one has been damaged. So the ano's been done, knife is done. This is going out to my customer, William. I already did my mailing for the week. It'll probably go out next week, but it's done. I redid the ano, redid the hardware, two-toned the pocket clip for him. All-around service that I can do here at Crazy Sharp. John, I appreciate the opportunity for you to let me send this video. For everyone else that follows me, you know the deal. If you like the videos, give them a thumbs up. But if you don't like them, give them a thumbs down. Please try to tell me why. There's going to be in this corner a link to a video that YouTube thinks you like. Down here is going to be a link to John's channel, for those of you that follow me but don't follow John. In this corner is going to be a subscription link, and down here is a link to the Patreon. Like I've said, if you guys want me to be able to go and shoot video with Tim Reeve at Chris Reeve Knives, he and I have talked about it. He would love to have us come out and video for the channel out there. It's a matter of Patreon. And if you want to if you guys want to see me go up to Petaluma and talk with Mark Begg and Mattia Barani about Mattia Barani cutlery, and just do a video strictly about that, that's something that requires travel. That's what the Patreon's for. If you want to help support my daughter's ice skating, she is, there they are again. She's currently 3rd in the nation in her bracket, in her group for girls juvenile, I think. 3rd in the nation, #1 on the West Coast. There is a link to a GoFundMe down below, and if you need a Grimsmo Norseman sharpened, there's a link to my email. My email will be in the comments or the description below, where you can reach out to me and get sharpening service. Guys, I love you all. Have a great, I'm sorry to my subscribers, this is longer than I usually make my videos, but there was a point behind it. Love you guys. Have a great weekend. Be safe, and I'll talk to you in the next video.